Hello. I'm Adelise Corvin, bride-to-be, daughter of a seamstress, survivor of the quietest kind of war. And this morning my sister shaved my head while I slept, with a razor, hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. I woke to silence, so sharp it felt like a blade against my skin. At first, I didn't move. I lay still, eyes closed, hoping it was just the draft through the window or the weight of the day ahead pressing into my spine. But something was off, terribly off. The pillow beneath my cheek was too soft, too smooth. My scalp tingled, like wind had touched it directly. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was hair. My hair. Blonde curls scattered across white cotton like confetti at a funeral. I bolted upright. My hand shot to my head, and my breath caught when I felt skin, bare, slick, cold. My scalp was naked. My head had been shaved. Not unevenly. Not sloppily.
Clean.
Deliberate. And then I saw her, standing in the doorway, small hands clenched around the hem of her unicorn pajama shirt. Maylise. My little sister. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Just that face.
Pale.
Steady. Afraid of nothing and everything. Why, my voice cracked. It wasn't a question. It was the shattering of something I didn't yet understand. The scream that followed wasn't mine. It came from somewhere deeper, animalistic. Vera rushed in, her house shoes slapping hard against the oak floors. One look at me, and she gasped, covering her mouth like it could somehow stop what had already been done. "Oh my God," she whispered, turning on Maylise. "What did you do?" She grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her once. "What is wrong with you? This is her wedding day." Harland, my father, trailed behind her like a shadow that forgot how to make noise. He didn't say a word, just looked at me, and then at the hair, and then at the wall behind me like maybe it would explain things better than we could. I tried to stand but felt the veil tangled beneath me, still fastened to a headpiece that now had no hair to cling to. I sat back down, numb. From the hallway, I could hear Dorian's voice in my memory. "You'll look perfect. Just don't change anything. I like things simple." Simple. Like a table assignment. Like how my name had been misprinted on the seating chart last night. Adeline, not Adelise. And how I'd been seated near the restroom at the overflow table, next to a cousin I barely remembered and someone's plus one who reeked of beer. I had laughed it off. Told myself it didn't matter. That none of it meant anything. But now, sitting here with hair on my lap like it had fallen from someone else's head, I knew better. This wasn't an accident. Not the seating. Not the name. Not this. Why would she do this? I asked, my voice barely audible. Maylise stepped forward. Her gaze didn't falter. "Because if I didn't, you wouldn't make it past tonight." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. I saw my mother flinch. My father turned away. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Looking back now, I should have asked more questions. But at that moment, I was too stunned to process anything beyond the ache behind my eyes and the cold creeping up my neck. That's where it all started. Later, alone in my room, I sat in front of the mirror. What stared back at me wasn't a bride. It was someone I didn't recognize. The bruises near my collarbone peeked out from beneath the neckline of my robe. The veil lay in a heap beside me, like some strange afterbirth of a life that never began. I heard Vera outside the door. She was on the phone. "We'll fix this," she said, voice clipped. "She's just having a moment." A moment. As if I had chosen this. As if Maylise had woken up and decided to ruin everything because she was jealous, or unwell, or broken. But I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't confused. She wasn't lost. She was certain. And that certainty terrified me more than the hair on the floor or the wedding that was hours away. Because if Melis had done this with purpose, what exactly had she been saving me from? I didn't know what was waiting for me next. The boutique smelled like dusted powder and stale perfume, Vera's signature. Not the expensive kind. The kind that lingers long after it should have faded, clinging to lace and silence. She didn't speak when we walked in, just locked the door behind us and pulled the blinds halfway down, like shame was a draft we could block. My scalp still tingled. Not from pain, just from exposure. Every surface of my body felt overexposed, like my skin was louder without the hair to frame it. Even the carpet under my feet felt rougher, like it didn't want me there. Vera gestured to the changing screen in the corner. A plastic garment bag hung beside it, shimmering like a body bag under the boutique's old fluorescent bulbs. "This is what you're wearing now," she said, tone clipped like she was reading off a checklist. The neckline's been raised. Long sleeves. Structured fabric. It's more respectful. Respectful. Not beautiful. Not mine. She didn't wait for a response. Just turned her back and busied herself with a steamer that hissed louder than I ever had in this house. I stepped behind the screen, peeled off my robe, and slipped into the new gown. The fabric scratched my ribs. The zipper caught halfway at my back, right over an old bruise that still hadn't faded. I winced, loud enough for her to hear.
But she didn't ask. Didn't even glance.
That moment changed everything. Because a week ago, Dorian had touched the same bruise and whispered, "Only I should see you like this." And now, here I was, being zipped into silence by the woman who raised me. I stepped out. She looked me over like a display model, then nodded. "No one will see anything. You'll look elegant, controlled." She reached for a string of pearls, hers, not mine, and fastened them at the base of my throat, like a leash I'd agreed to wear. Looking back now, I should have ripped them off. Instead, I stood there.
Stiff. Silent.
Complicit. That's where it all started. I sat on the stool by the window while Vera adjusted the hem. The dress clung to me like obligation. Every pin she inserted felt like a point scored against my will. The phone rang. She ignored it. Probably a vendor. Or worse, Melis. "Why did you change the dress?" I asked. My voice barely registered. She didn't look up. "Because you don't think clearly when you're upset," she said. Someone had to take charge. Take charge. That was her phrase. She'd used it when Dad forgot anniversaries. When I got sick at school, and she sent Harland instead of coming herself. When Dorian got controlling and she told me to breathe through it. Take charge.
Take silence.
Take me. Melis knocked on the door, voice small. "Can I come in?" Vera opened it just enough to slip her face out. "You've done enough damage for one day," she snapped, then shut it again. I caught a glimpse of Melis's eyes. Wide, brimming, but unwavering. Vera turned to me and smiled like it was a business transaction. "You'll thank me later." That's the thing about people like her. They build cages and call them castles. Dorian arrived 15 minutes later. He brought flowers. White orchids, the kind that look expensive and smell like nothing. He kissed my cheek, lightly, strategically. "Hey," he said softly. "Rough morning, huh? But it's okay. We'll laugh about this someday." He handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond bracelet. Not an engagement gift. Not a token of love. A muzzle. "Let's just keep moving forward," he added. "No more surprises, all right?" I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I was running out of ways to stall. Looking back now, I realize I'd stopped being the bride a long time ago.
I was just the sacrifice wrapped in satin.
Later, when Vera stepped out to take a call, I stood in front of the mirror. The dress fit too perfectly. Every seam a promise I hadn't made. Every pearl a debt I didn't know. I didn't cry. I just stared. And then I saw her in the reflection.
Maylise.
Standing just outside the door. Her eyes met mine. Only one of us looked away. She disappeared before I could say anything. Just a glimpse of her hair vanishing around the corner, a rustle of footsteps too light to follow. I should have gone after her, but I didn't. I sat there instead, locked in my own silence, trapped in a reflection I no longer recognized. The drive to the house was quiet. Dorian's hands stayed firmly on the wheel. Both hands. He drove like he was navigating a winding cliffside road, not the straight stretch of pavement leading back to the house where we'd first pretended to be a family. His voice was soft. "Rough morning, huh?" he said. "You've had a shock. It's not your fault." I stared out the window, watching trees blur past. I didn't answer. I folded my hands in my lap like I used to when I was 9 and didn't want to make noise at church. My phone buzzed once in my purse. I didn't check it. He exhaled, long and low. "Look, I know you didn't ask for any of this." Things spun out a little. "Yeah? But we can fix it. You and me, we're solid. Right?" I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't have a better move. I didn't realize it then, but that nod gave him permission he didn't deserve. We pulled up to the house. He leaned over me to open my door. His hand grazed my thigh, firm, not soft. A beat too long. "You all right?" he asked, tone careful. A child ran across the sidewalk just ahead of us and dropped a bottle of juice. The crash startled me. Dorian slammed the brakes. "Jesus, kid," he muttered. His hand tightened against my leg. Then, like he remembered he wasn't supposed to, he let go.
"Sorry."
Reflex. You know how I get with noise. I gave him a half smile. The kind you offer a neighbor you don't trust with your spare key. Back inside, the house was quiet. My father wasn't around. Vera was likely at the boutique or on the phone trying to salvage what was left of our family reputation. The silence inside these walls used to feel comforting. Now it pressed against my skin like static. That's when Maylise appeared. She was sitting cross-legged on the stairwell, elbows on her knees, as if she'd been waiting. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. He grabbed me too. The world tilted. I didn't move. "Last month," she said, "you were out." He was looking for something. Said he thought I had your phone. I stepped toward her. She looked up at me with the kind of calm only children have when they've already decided no one's going to believe them. "I told Mom," she added. She said I was being dramatic. My breath caught. I couldn't speak. Not yet. Looking back now, I think that was the moment something cracked open inside me. Not a scream. A shift. A click. Like a lock turning from the inside. I walked to my room. Not because I needed space, but because if I didn't sit down, I was going to fall. I closed the door softly behind me. Sat on the edge of the bed like it didn't belong to me anymore.
Pulled out an old photo album.
The kind Vera insisted we display for guests but never opened. There I was. Age 6. Ponytail lopsided. Missing front teeth. Laughing at something just outside the frame. Maylise beside me, holding my hand. We used to be each other's world. Then I grew up. Got quiet. Learned how to smile through it, too. I closed the album and stared at the wall. The room felt smaller than it used to. More crowded with things that didn't belong to me anymore. That's when I noticed my old mirror. Still cracked along the corner from where Vera had dropped it during a fight with my father over a burned casserole. I looked into it. No makeup. No veil. No softness.
Just me.
And I realized something. I wasn't just marrying someone dangerous. I was raised by people who taught me to smile through it. Maylise didn't knock. She didn't have to. The moment I opened the bedroom door, she was already there, small, silent, holding something behind her back like a secret too heavy for her age. Her fingers were pale, tense. The kind of tension I remembered from science class when we were told not to touch the petri dishes. Dangerous pressure, building under glass. "Just listen," she said, her voice barely a breath. Then she held out the recorder. Pink plastic. Stickers peeling at the edges. I didn't ask questions. I pressed play. And then I stopped breathing. Dorian's voice filled the space between us like smoke seeping under a locked door. "At Jake's after party," he said, his tone casual, like he was talking about football or weather. "She'll be drunk. Easy. And then we're locked in. Pregnant means permanent." It wasn't even what he said that shattered me. It was how relaxed he sounded saying it. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just handed the recorder back to Maëlys with fingers I barely felt. Looking back, I should have thrown it against the wall. Instead, I stood there frozen, waiting for the world to react. It did, just not how I'd imagined. Vera walked in. She didn't knock either. "What are you listening to?" she asked, reaching forward like she already knew. The tape was still rolling when she snatched it from my hand. "Turn that off," she hissed. "That's enough. Don't destroy this day with nonsense." I stared at her. "That's not nonsense," I said quietly. "That's a confession." She didn't blink. "He's a man, Adelise. They say things. They get carried away. You'll humiliate all of us if you react to every joke like it's war." And just like that, it wasn't about safety anymore. It was about spectacle. She wasn't afraid of what he might do. She was afraid of what I might expose. That moment changed everything. Because I understood, finally, fully, that she didn't want a safe daughter. She wanted a silent one. I left the room without another word. My feet moved on their own, carrying me back to the one place in the house that still remembered who I used to be. My childhood bedroom hadn't changed much. Same faded wallpaper, same dresser with the chipped knob, same mirror on the back of the door, still cracked in the corner. But something had changed. Taped to the mirror was a photo. Me and Maëlys, 6 years ago. I was braiding her hair. She was looking up at me like I hung the moon. That picture had been in my nightstand drawer. I hadn't seen it in years. My hand reached for it. And that's when Vera appeared behind me, again. She didn't speak at first. Just walked up and ripped the photo from the mirror. "You don't need reminders of childish things," she snapped. "Grow up." Maëlys had followed her. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not defiant, not afraid. Just done. I looked at her. She didn't cry, didn't speak. She just turned and walked away. That's where it all started. That night, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't cry. But I could listen. I put in headphones and replayed the recording. Every syllable stabbed at the inside of my throat like something I'd swallowed but couldn't digest. My fingers tightened around the recorder. Then I reached for my phone. The screen glowed. I opened a new message. Typed in a name I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Isla Marin. She'd been my teacher once. Kind. Quiet. The only adult who'd ever looked me in the eye when I said I wasn't okay. "Can we talk?" I typed. Then hit send before I could back out. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I didn't wait for a reply. The message to Isla was sent, sealed with all the desperation I wasn't ready to name. I watched the screen for a few seconds longer than necessary, then turned it off and slid it into my coat pocket. The room was too still. I needed movement. I needed air. I packed a bag in 15 minutes. Not because I had a plan, but because I had a pulse, and it was screaming at me to run. I grabbed only what I needed. A change of clothes. My ID. That voice recorder. The ultrasound picture Melis had taken from Vera's desk. I didn't even stop to check if I had socks that matched. The hallway creaked under my steps as I passed Melis' door. Hers was slightly ajar. I paused, hand on the knob, but didn't go in. She deserved to sleep through this. I slipped out the back door like a teenager sneaking out to meet a boy. Funny how it felt the same. Only this time the boy was the one I was running from. That's where it all started. The sky was bruised with clouds when I stepped outside. I ordered a car from my phone, double-checked the address. The screen glowed faintly in the dark. Then a headlight flicked on across the street. I froze. Dorian's car. He leaned against it like he'd been there for hours. Like he knew I'd do this eventually. You really thought I would know? He asked, pushing off the hood, keys swinging in his fingers. My feet didn't move. He walked over and opened the passenger door for me. You want to talk out here? He asked. You want neighbors to see you like this? I didn't speak.
Just got in.
Sometimes silence is the only move you have left. The locks clicked shut the moment he turned the key. A soft sound. Precise. Final. He pulled away from the curb with the ease of someone who thought he'd already won. You're just tired, he said after a few blocks. Emotional. You do this sometimes. Spiral. His voice was low, calm, almost affectionate. I don't blame you, he continued. There's been a lot of pressure. Weddings are intense. I've read about this kind of thing. Cold feet, nervous breakdowns, it's all normal. He paused, glanced at me. I mean, no one blames you for being sensitive. That word, it landed like a slap I didn't see coming. I stared out the window. My hands were curled so tightly in my lap, they felt bloodless. He reached over and laid a hand on my thigh, gentle at first, until it wasn't. I told you, he said, this is forever. You said that too, remember? I didn't flinch, but my stomach turned. Looking back now, I realized that was the last time I let him touch me. The house looked different when we pulled up, not visibly, just spiritually, like it had grown teeth. He killed the engine, waited for me to get out. I didn't. He walked around, opened my door again. I stepped out on my own. Not for him. For me. Inside, the lights were low. Most of the house was asleep, but one glow came from the kitchen. Melis. She was sitting at the table, a phone in her hand. When she saw me, she stood without a word and walked over. You're not safe, she said, then handed me the phone. Photos. Dozens.
Me. Sleeping.
Shoulders exposed. Bruises like shadows under my skin. Hand-shaped marks. A swollen wrist. She had documented everything. Every wound I had convinced myself wasn't bad enough. I took them when you were sleeping, she whispered, so no one could say they weren't real. My knees nearly buckled. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I had tried so hard not to. Upstairs, I sat on my bed, phone in hand. The photos were still open. I clicked share. Typed Islah's name into the to field. Attached them all. I hesitated at the subject line, then typed 2 words. Please help. Then hit send. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I breathed. For the first time in days, I really breathed. And then I opened a second email. This one for myself. Drafted a message I wasn't ready to send yet. But I would. Eventually. Because I wasn't going to run. I was going to fight, just not their way. The reply from Islah came just after dawn, when the world was still wrapped in fog and the light filtering through my curtains hadn't made up its mind whether to stay. My phone buzzed once and there it was, her message. One line.
Direct.
I've seen the photos. I've filed the report. Someone else came forward too.
Her name is Kala.
You're not the first. I read it twice. Then again, slower. You're not the first. Those words landed in my chest like a stone wrapped in warm cloth, heavy, but somehow comforting. A strange alchemy of relief and rage stitched together. Relief, because it meant I wasn't alone. Rage, because I wasn't the only one. Part of me, shamefully, had wanted to be the first, the outlier, the one-off, the cautionary tale people whispered about in disbelief. Because that meant maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was me. Easier to fix myself than to accept what he truly was. But the other part, the quieter, wiser part, understood that not being the first meant I wasn't imagining things. It meant the monster wasn't just in my story. He was a pattern. That moment changed everything. Kala and I met at a cafe 2 blocks from the courthouse. The kind of place where old men argue over baseball box scores and women in aprons refill coffee, without asking. The windows were a little fogged from the morning chill, the smell inside a mix of burnt coffee grounds and grease-soaked toast. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was going to throw up. She was already there, seated in a booth in the far corner, where the sunlight didn't quite reach. Her hair was cropped short in a way that made her neck look exposed, vulnerable. She wore sleeves too long for the weather, and her voice, when she greeted me, was low and careful. But when she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn, leather-bound journal, her hands were steady. She placed it on the table and looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. "This is his," she said quietly. By way of me. The pages were wrinkled, some stained by water or tears. I couldn't tell. But the ink, black and aggressive, remained clear. He said if I left, no one would believe me. He smashed my phone. I told myself it was an accident. I thought I was imagining it. I wasn't. Sentence after sentence, story after story, I saw echoes of my own pain mirrored back at me. I didn't know Kala, but I recognized the contours of her trauma as if they were drawn from my own skin. It was like flipping through a diary I'd never written, but somehow remembered. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Later that morning, Isla sent me another message, this time a voice clip. No warning. No explanation. Just the file. I hesitated for a second before pressing play. It was Dorian. His voice was slurred, but the arrogance was unmistakable. He was at a bar, probably too far gone to realize someone had been recording. Once we're married, she's just an asset. I'll take her name, her insurance. She's soft. Easy. She'll fold. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as my hands curled into fists. That wasn't love. That wasn't even anger. That was strategy. He had never chosen me. He had chosen what I could lose, what he could gain. And suddenly I realized I had something to lose too. Something far more sacred than him. My name. My silence. My spine. That's where it began. I forwarded the clip to my father's old lawyer, the one who used to handle corporate disputes and wills. Then, on instinct, I sent it to a local journalist I followed, attaching the file with a note in the subject line. In case truth still matters. At first, I didn't expect much. Maybe a polite thank you. Maybe nothing at all. But by lunchtime, Channel 5 aired a snippet of it. Dorian's voice, slurred, calculated, filled living rooms across the county. And by 2 p.m., I was trending. Not as a fiancé, not as a victim, but as a warning. Vera showed up before sunset. I was in the living room, surrounded by printouts, screenshots of bank logins, copies of statements, highlighted text threads, evidence. She stood in the doorway, arms folded, lips pursed, a scowl etched so deeply it looked painted on. She looked like a woman on the edge of betrayal. Or more truthfully, a woman whose version of reality was cracking. "What is this I'm hearing from Channel 5? She demanded, voice sharp and cold. I didn't answer immediately. I just looked up from the folder in my lap. "Why would you do this to yourself?" she continued. "To us."
Us.
As if silence was a family value. I stood slowly and held up a printed log, a record showing Dorian had accessed my bank account 13 times without permission. Same IP. Same browser. "You think this is about embarrassment?" I asked. "This is about survival." She scoffed, shaking her head. "You're overreacting. You've always been dramatic." There it was. That word. The word they use to flatten women who won't bend. To tame us into palatability. To smother our warnings and call them noise. "I'm not being dramatic," I said. "I'm being deliberate." Her expression hardened, but I saw something else too. A flicker of fear. "You're throwing your whole future away over a few bruises and bad feelings?" I stepped toward her.
No.
"I'm throwing away the belief that I owe you silence just because you called it love." She didn't speak, just stared. So I gave her the final truth. The one that had kept me up at night. The one that had made me doubt my own worth, my own name, my own story. "If you won't protect me, Mother," I said quietly, "you don't get to protect the name anymore either." Then I walked past her. Out of the house. Out of the past. Into the storm I had chosen for myself. Because this time I wasn't running from it. I was the storm. The ceremony was set to begin in 20 minutes, but no one knew a storm had already been scheduled. Not one summoned by the weather, but one long overdue, brewing in silence, forged in betrayal, and dressed in white like everything else that morning. I walked the perimeter of the venue, my heels clicking against marble so highly polished it reflected everything but truth. Every corner gleamed. The chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears. The florals, lilies, hydrangeas, orchids were arranged with surgical precision. Tasteful, controlled. Even the air smelled curated. Vanilla, money, and denial. Melis walked quietly beside me. She was small, but grounded, like a tether to a reality no one else seemed to remember. She hadn't asked a single question since we woke up.
She didn't need to.
Her silence said what words couldn't. When we reached the far end of the hall, she tugged at my sleeve. "You can still say no," she whispered, eyes wide but steady. I turned to look at her. "I'm not hiding anymore," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "Not now. Not ever again." And looking back, I realized I wasn't walking toward a wedding. I was walking into a courtroom without walls. And everyone there? They didn't know they were about to become the jury. That's where it all started. The guests had taken their seats. Rows and rows of them, distant relatives, Dorian's colleagues, local press disguised as friends of the family. Chatter buzzed just above the string quartet, polite and rehearsed. Laughter mingled with the sound of clinking glasses and the occasional congratulations, whispered too loudly for sincerity. People checked their watches, posed with the flowers I hadn't picked, uploaded carefully edited photos that wouldn't age well. I stood behind the double doors, veil draped over my arm like a costume I'd already decided not to wear. Melis pressed the envelope into the MC's hand and leaned up to whisper into his ear. He blinked, looked at her, then at me. I gave him the smallest nod. And then he tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice steady despite the shift in air. "Before we begin, we've been asked to play something." A brief static. Then his voice.
Dorian. Calm.
Confident.
Cold.
"She's not strong. She's broken. Easy to steer. She's exactly what I need." It cut through the venue like thunder in a chapel. Audible gasps broke out like popcorn kernels in silence. Someone in the second row dropped their champagne. A woman 2 seats back leaned into her partner's ear and whispered, "Is that him?" The doors burst open with brutal timing. 2 uniformed officers entered, sharp silhouettes against the soft cream of the marble. Dorian Vask, one of them asked, even though his badge already knew the answer.
Dorian rose, too late.
The handcuffs caught the chandelier light as they snapped around his wrists.
Click, click.
Vera stood up, face pale as frost. "This is a mistake," she yelled, shoving past a chair. "A misunderstanding." No one replied, because the room had already broken. Melis stepped forward. Small steps, big silence. She walked to the podium with the envelope held like fragile glass. The MC opened it and unfolded a black and white photograph, grainy, unmistakable. An ultrasound. He held it up without saying a word. Melis cleared her throat. "My sister," she said softly, "was carrying his child."
She didn't know yet.
But he did. The air changed. You could feel it in your lungs. She was going to be trapped. By blood. By law. By a man who smiled as he planned it. A few people looked away. Some leaned forward, eyes wide. The silence wasn't polite anymore. It was a verdict. Vera surged toward the podium, each step soaked in rage. "You little liar," she shouted, snatching at the ultrasound. She slapped it from the MC's hand, and it fluttered like a wounded bird to the floor. I stepped in front of Melis, between her and the woman who'd defended Dorian until the end. "She didn't lie," I said, loud enough to echo. "You just refused to see." Vera opened her mouth, then closed it. Because even she couldn't argue with proof. Even she couldn't outrun a recording that cruel. I looked around the room. People were no longer admiring the flowers. They weren't focused on the altar, or the string quartet, or the glittering glasses of champagne. They were looking at us.
At me.
At Melis. Not with pity. With understanding. Because the truth had finally interrupted the performance. The white silk had been a disguise. The piano music had been a distraction. But now the world saw it for what it was. This wasn't a wedding. It was a reckoning. And I wasn't the broken one. I was the survivor. Let them see the blood behind the lace. The pain behind the pearls. The war behind the wine. Let them see what this family buried under money and monograms. Let them see what you covered in white silk and called love. The press didn't wait for confirmation. By sunrise, my name was on every local broadcast. They ran old photos, ones I hadn't approved, where my smile was soft and empty, like someone else's face had borrowed mine. Reporters used words like courage and scandal in the same breath. They said things like unfolding drama and emotional day at the courthouse, as if this was just another headline in someone else's story. But it wasn't a story. It was my life, my body, my name. And I wasn't going to let anyone else write the ending. That's where it all started. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. I wore a black suit. No veil. No lace. No symbols of belonging to anyone but myself. The courtroom smelled like old wood and institutional bleach, 2 scents I now associated with betrayal and attempted dignity. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with eyes sharper than her robe, sat above us like someone who had heard every kind of lie and still believed in truth. Dorian sat across the aisle, flanked by his attorney and silence. His hair was styled, his jaw clenched just enough to look human.
He didn't look at me.
He looked through me. I stood when they called my name. "They used to call me dramatic," I said, voice steady. "Now they call me plaintiff." I handed the court clerk a folder. Inside were copies of every image Melis had taken, every bruise, every fingerprint. Islaw's affidavit was next. Then Kala's journal, page by page. Each entry detailed a pattern. The same words, the same gaslighting, the same violence masked as love. "This isn't a grudge," I said to the room. "It's a warning." When I spoke, I didn't cry. I named each incident, each account, each threat. The time he blocked the door, the time he took my phone, the time he said, "If you ever leave, I'll ruin you." His attorney called it a misunderstanding. The judge didn't flinch. She asked no questions. Just read. Then it was Dorian's turn to speak. He adjusted his tie, looked directly at the judge. "I never laid a hand on her in anger," he said. "She's overreacting. This is all part of some emotional spiral. We were about to get married. She got scared." He looked at me for the first time. "And now she's punishing me for it." No one in the courtroom moved. Not even Vera. Especially not Vera. The judge delivered the sentence like she was handing down a map out of a burning building. 8 years. No parole. Mandatory restitution. Registry status. His father's face collapsed like a paper cup. The man who built an entire law firm on public image had just watched it all crumble in one afternoon. By sunset, his firm filed for bankruptcy. The ripple had already begun. That moment changed everything. Vera gasped when the ruling hit the bench. She looked at me, not with sympathy, with accusation, like I had broken something she had built. Maybe I had, but what she built had never been meant to protect me. Harlan didn't speak, but I saw him reach for Melis's hand and squeeze it. Just once. Maybe that was his way of saying sorry. Or maybe it was the first honest thing he'd done in years. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. I didn't stop. No makeup. No statement. Just a letter in my coat pocket. A clean sheet of paper with a single sentence in the center. "The name Mrs. Vask has been dissolved. Legally and otherwise. No longer his. Not their daughter. Not that bride.
Just me."
The vows they wrote for me were burned. The one I wrote for myself? I'm just getting started. The applause wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to be. Polite claps. A few nods. One woman near the back whispered, under her breath, like she didn't mean for it to escape. I stood behind the podium with nothing else to say, and no one left to impress. Behind me, the new sign caught a sliver of sunlight through the garden windows. Voices reclaimed, "A resource center for survivors." I hadn't written the slogan. Melis had. The first time I saw this building, it was boarded up, forgotten. Bricks faded like memory. Windows cloudy with old grief. Now it had flowers. Real ones. I stepped down from the platform. No veil. No armor. Just my own hair growing back in uneven tufts and a sense of presence that finally fit my body. That moment changed everything. Melis met me just off stage, her hand curled around something tied with ribbon. She didn't speak, just held it out like a peace offering or a piece of the past we both weren't sure we should reopen. Inside the envelope was a photo, taped back together, wrinkled at the corners. Familiar. Us, me and her. Sitting in front of the Christmas tree the year Dad forgot to buy lights. She was grinning with a cookie in one hand, and I was bent beside her, laughing at something long gone. Vera had torn that photo off my mirror the morning of the wedding. Said I needed to grow up. Now it was back. Not perfect. Not polished. Mended. Beneath the photo was a note. Handwritten in Melis's small, careful print. You didn't lose everything. You let go of what was killing you. The ache in my throat wasn't sadness. It was recognition. I pulled her in and held her longer than I had in months. That's where it all started. After the guests trickled out, a reporter approached me in the garden behind the center. She was young, nervous, carried herself like someone who hadn't yet learned how to hold bad news with both hands. "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked. The question settled between us like an unpaid bill. I looked at her. I thought of Vera's silence, of Harlan's last text, "Hope you're doing okay," sent 3 days after the verdict with no follow-up. "I feel free," I said. "Which is different. Better." She wrote that down like it meant something. She didn't ask about Dorian, or the baby I lost 2 weeks after the court ruling. I didn't offer it. Forgiveness isn't required for peace. Just truth. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I wandered toward the new sign by the gate. It was carved from wood, simple, honest. "You are not imagining it. You are not alone." The wind caught the edge of it just slightly, made it creak like an old porch swing. I sat on the bench nearby, resting one hand against the healing scar near my collarbone. Not to cover it, just to feel it, to remind myself what survival felt like. Looking back, I don't remember the exact moment I chose myself. Maybe it was when Maylise handed me the razor in her sleep, or when I walked out of the courtroom and didn't look back. But I do remember this. She saved me with a razor. I saved myself by never handing the blade back. Some scars don't scream, they whisper. And sometimes the quietest act of rebellion is survival itself. Have you ever protected someone, and they never knew it? Or maybe you've been saved in ways you didn't recognize until years later. I'd love to hear what moments shaped your strength. If this story moved you, subscribe and stay close. The next chapter we tell could be yours.